Say that again. Yeah. Well, look, we better. So the question was, you know, finding the right solution to quarterback in this league, which is obviously very competitive in our division. I think it's vital. I saw this like humorous meme the other day where there was a Bronco fan with a shirt on, and there was like 8 quarterbacks names with a cross through it, and he's drinking the quarterback Kool-Aid, and our job is to make sure that this next one, doesn't have a line through it. I think so. The question is, in our interactions, meetings with quarterbacks here, what's important? I think all of it. The first thing is getting to put a name with a face, and it's the first personal visit where you're like, nice to meet you, and then you'll spend time with questions, and there'll be football related, and there'll be follow-up meetings, pro day visits, private workout visits. And so these are all like pieces of the equation that I think are necessary. And obviously the beginning of this event was to combine medical information, hence the term combine. And then pretty soon, let's run a 40 and let's run a few of these cone drills. And let's have these meetings. But the interactions in the meetings are important because it is for a lot of us, the scouts maybe not so much, but for a lot of us, it's the first time we're getting introduced to a prospect, and so not just at quarterback, but at the other positions. And I think that first impression is important.
Sean, can we give some advice to our young student athletes about the type of players you're looking for when they get to this point?
Young student athletes, what are we looking for? I think this. I think that, we're looking for goal-driven players, athletes that are unselfish to some degree. And then I would say that one trait is that we use that term grit a lot, but that ability to get up time and time again, overcome adversity. It's a little bit more challenging now with the portal. Like, I started thinking to myself, how many times when I was in school that I would have loved to jump into a portal, upset or disappointed or mad or whatever, had a bad practice. And but those traits still exist, and I think those are important traits when we're visiting with young athletes.
Having coached a couple of shorter stature quarterbacks, when you were designing your offense, how much of the scheme and protections did you rely on to create passing lanes?
Yeah, good question. So quarterbacks that aren't as tall, maybe that aren't prototype, I think generally speaking, it might vary how teams value prototype heights, but 6'2" might be a starting point. Look, as a coordinator, I've had Kerry Collins, who was 6'5", Quincy Carter, who was built differently, Romo, Bledsoe, Testaverde, and then Drew for a long time. There was an evolution with Drew. I don't know that we set out to go in a direction relative to the makeup of our offensive line, but he was someone that was extremely athletic in the pocket. He's a very good foot athlete. And so, look, that first draft in 2006, I was telling the story last night. In the 4th round, we have the 2nd pick of that draft, and we're going to select tight end Owen Daniels, who was at Wisconsin, played at my high school. And so we just had to wait for the Texans to make their pick. This is when the draft was 2 days. Of course, we just finished breakfast. I'm on the phone with Owen, and This is when you had that classic call waiting where, like, when you're on the other end, you know someone just clicked in, and I'm like, and it gets back on. The Texans are going to draft me. We end up backing up a few picks, and we select a right guard out of Bloomsburg, Jari Evans, who's going to be a future Hall of Fame player. And so we didn't know at the time we were matching someone who was extremely talented inside for where that important part of the pocket is for a quarterback. The 3 yards behind the center, because generally speaking, we're going to climb the pocket, and at that point, quarterbacks can do a lot of different things. Then Carl Nix came a year later, and then pretty soon we had 2 really good guards, and I think maybe too often we were given too much credit for, part of that was an evolution, and we liked what we saw, and then it was like, well, we need more of that. But I do think part of our jobs always is to build around the strength of your players. And so even this year, what are the things that we feel like our receivers do well, that Russ does well, the running backs, that's our jobs. And so our offense, when I say wherever I've been, has been always been an evolution of starting with the ingredients we have and then building around them. So I think there's still some things that are paramount today. At some point, teams are going to make you win from the pocket. We can rush a certain way to keep a quarterback from escaping, and so we're going to have to be, wherever you're at, proficient enough on third down to take a snap, find a throw, and protect that spot that you're referencing, regardless of height. Because I think oftentimes these guys are seeing through lanes, not necessarily over them, but certainly for some quarterbacks that can be a little bit more challenging.
And Sean, having worked with Ronald Curry for a lot of minutes, what makes him a good fit in Buffalo to help Josh Allen?
Yeah, Ronald Curry in Buffalo. I'm excited for him. We were lucky enough to have Ronald for a number of years. I lose track of how many. He's a real good communicator. He's smart. He's been in, a lot of, I would say, a lot of productive offenses and been a part of a lot of productive teams. I think he understands the work week and the time on task necessary. I knew how much Al Davis thought of him when he drafted him in Oakland. But I'm anxious to follow his progress because I think he's a real bright young coach with a great future. I think the difficulties in evaluating, I think the receiver position's difficult. There are a lot of misses there. And the quarterback position's difficult. Sometimes, and this is not just recent, and we go all the way back to, the run and shoot, and we can list a number of guys that were successful that we didn't expect to be successful and guys that weren't. And I think that oftentimes the systems that they're in can be difficult to evaluate. It's harder to find good inside linebackers anymore. It used to be difficult to evaluate offensive tackles because teams were running, option football, veer schemes, wishbone, or what have you. Now we get great film in evaluating whether guys can pass protect or not. But then conversely, we get more difficult film at other positions. To your point with quarterbacks, I think that I think one thing that's hard to measure is their ability to multitask and process and make decisions. It's one thing, like you can visit with someone and, they can be intelligent, but how quickly can they deliver the information and how quickly can they get through the progression? Are they accurate? There's some fundamental things that we have to see that are present. And so sometimes it's not as difficult as we make it out to be. And then sometimes, listen, it's very difficult. And so I think we'll be really good at this. And I think to some degree we're glad that a lot of people aren't.
John, how do you explain the
What you prioritize for quarterbacks like 10 years ago? What did you want in a quarterback?
I don't know that a lot's changed relative to prioritizing what's most important for the quarterback position. Certainly, there has been change, but look, I think accuracy is important. I think leadership comes in a lot of different ways. So, historically speaking, we've had quiet, successful quarterbacks. We've had outspoken, successful quarterbacks. We've had tall, short. So there are a lot of things that make you understand shapes and sizes, personality traits, but there are some constants that go with successful players at that position. I think offenses have changed a little bit, and yet we've never not valued a quarterback that can beat you with his feet. That goes back to Young and Montana, and that historically that's nothing new. But we are seeing more in the college game, and then we get to evaluate that, and then we're seeing more of that come into our game, and I think it's good. I think it's good. I'm not finished answering that question. I think 4th and 1 overtime in the Super Bowl, the play we saw Kansas City run, I don't know that we see that play 10 years ago. That doesn't mean we don't see a conversion, but I don't think we see that RPO option with a few different reads. And so those are some of the things that I think have evolved.